Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Tell Me Yours, a storytelling podcast with me, your host, Trey Everett. Hello and welcome to another episode of Tell Me Yours. I'm Trey, your host. Today on the pod, I have an awesome guest. I was really looking forward to this and it delivered. My guest today is the creator and owner of Black Rose Writing, an indie publishing house in Texas. Black Rose Writing put out my book, Beneath the Surface, and it was incredible to work with them. My guest today is also on Ingram's Publisher Advisory Board, and he's the host of the Heard It Through the Rosevine podcast. Please welcome Reagan Rothe.
I do podcasts. Like, this is like easy, man. I can talk all day. And then I was like, when you sent your topic, I was like, this is actually harder because I have, and I'm sure we all do, but I was like, man, all the stories I would want to tell, like I can't share with our Black Rose Writing and readers and audience. I'm like, they're just not appropriate.
I
love
it.
Yeah, so I'm like, I gotta find a story that that's gonna be, rated for the what I want out there. It's like a politician, I'm sure.
That's so good. That's honestly such a common response, and it cracks me up every time. Because like my initial idea for this was whether I've known someone for 30 years or if I've known them for 30 minutes, like we all communicate with each other just through stories. Like everyone tells each other stories all the time, and I was like, oh, that's kind of a cool idea, just to connect with people and have them tell a story. But it's so funny because that's like the first response. People are like, I have no idea what story I would tell. Or people are like, I immediately know what story I could tell, but I literally cannot tell it. And I will never tell it. Like, I'm taking that story to the grave.
Yeah, it's like you wish you were part of the Howard Stern staff. And then, then I could just come in and tell, that's part of your job to just tell them, the worst story. And it's like, but unfortunately, a lot of our careers, those stories
oh my God,
are bad for them.
That is so funny to me. That's so funny. How long, when did you start Black Rose Writing? Like how many years has it been since you actually like started properly?
Started like part-time in 2006, and then in 2009 is when we launched it full-time. And that was
that's crazy
main revenue source. Yeah,
that's wild. That's really, really cool. Is that something that you always knew you wanted to do, or is it something that you kind of like found that you fell into?
No, definitely fell into. And I think you build a lot of your things like I played college golf, and I tried playing on some mini tours, and even after that, a year or so would go by, and then I'd kind of be like, man, I really want to play golf.
Yeah.
And I'd play like 2 to 3 months every day and really work and start playing in tournaments and stuff, and then just burn out. And so with Black Rose Writing, I've always thought like people, that's what you got to do in life. Like find something that, like, yeah, there's days where you don't feel well, or you're just tired, or you worked like a 12-hour day and you don't really want to go do work,
Yeah.
But after a day or two of that, or like if we take like go on like a book vacation, book business trip and do some fun stuff, mix it with marketing, something like that, or make a change or find some way, and you get remotivated. And so that's with Black Rose. I've always found passion. I mean, even after this amount of time, like I still get really excited to go do work, more often than not. And I think that's what everyone needs to find, that, that's something where it's not just like you're just passing days, like find something that you're passionate about.
I love that. With that being said, we are connecting this morning because you are going to tell me a story.
Yeah. So I dug pretty deep here and just kind of, I reread your preview stories, like just the templates of like, some people have said this, like, and I was thinking, I was like, man, I've got kind of a horror story from childhood.
Okay.
That I haven't, and I haven't called a friend because I was like, I gotta make sure, like, obviously my details are gonna be wrong. The way our memory is not gonna be accurate.
I love that. I love that so much because like we rely on our memories so much, but then when you really start to break it down, like our memories are not very good.
No, yeah. So I'm like, I'm gonna piece this together. I called my friend who the one I would know remember this story, and I was like, fill me in. Let me make sure, if there's anything I'm missing or anything to add to it. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Lechuza. It is a Mexican like thing of nightmares. It's like an old woman,
okay,
with like an owl head,
That's horrifying.
yes, and it eats people, and like at
Okay.
night. And so it's like this Mexican folklore, and there's so many different things. I even looked it up because I was like, I know the few things, but there's so many like little things like what you can't do and what you're supposed to do, or
Okay.
La
Yeah.
Lechuza will get you.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
and so we, growing up, in my town, it was mostly predominantly white and Hispanic.
Hmm.
And the Hispanic culture, a lot of our friends were always like, La Chusa, and being a white kid, I'm like, I don't even know what that is. Like, yeah, I mean, I'm scared of stuff, but that's not it. And
Yeah.
so when we're, I would say between the age somewhere, we probably started about 10 years old, but somewhere in like 10 to 13 range.
Okay.
We would have we had a camp house. So I grew up on a ranch, and we had this camp house that was about a half a mile from my house. So
Okay.
you had to walk down this road to this camp house. And so as when you're 11, 12 years old, like there's really nothing scary about staying out in the country in the camp house until your imagination makes it really, really
Yeah.
scary.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so we'd have these camp house parties, like birthday parties where it's like, hey, I just want to stay at the camp house with like 8 or 9 friends. And my parents, my dad, they would make sure we were set up, and then it was
I love
free
that.
reign.
Yeah, I
You're
love
at,
that.
and so like our contest was like, we'd always be like, who can stay up all night? That was one of the things, like
Yeah.
who's not going to go to sleep, things like that. And my good friend, a couple of the good friends, they did the same thing. Like they would have camp house parties too. So it kind of became a frequent thing where you'd stay at their camp house, and then we'd stay at mine and like other people's for birthdays and stuff.
I love that.
Well, so this one time, um, and I don't remember if it was just a party or camp house, but it's probably about, between 7 to 10 boys. And we were, doing our camp house stuff, and it's daylight. We have round hay bales. Are you familiar with like the big
Yeah.
round hay bales?
Uh-huh.
And they're all stacked together so you can run on top of.
That's
We
so
would
cool.
we would think of these things we did. We would play like hay bale football. And we're surprised no one, like there weren't more like
Yeah.
broken legs and stuff. Because we would run on top of these hay bales and try to play tackle football on the hay bales.
Oh my
And so you'd get
God.
blast. Like if you ran on the edge, obviously you risk getting knocked way off, and they're pretty tall, so it's a good drop, like a
Yeah.
trampoline height drop. So you get knocked off, or you'd get tackled in between them. They're
Oh,
touching, but there's
jeez.
some good gaps where like you could get arm and legs
Yeah.
caught and like folded.
Yeah, it's
So
a miracle that no one died doing this.
we had some injuries, yeah, but nothing ever that was reported back home. Usually, no
Oh
one ever
my
told their
gosh.
parents. So.
Yeah.
So we were playing the hay bale tackle football, and it was getting dusk, or the sun was going down,
Hmm.
starting to lose light, and it got to the point just where it was hard to see clear. And we've got these really big oak trees, a few yards, 20, 30 yards away, kind of off down a fence line by the camp house.
Hmm.
And the hay bales are probably about 50 yards, 40 yards from the camp house. And in the top of one of these trees, something made this
Oh God.
whistling, like really loud sound. Like it was probably a big owl, but it was just dark enough where the kind of the moss and the leaves and everything that were still in the oak tree, you couldn't see
Yeah.
what it was. I don't even remember hearing the sound, but one of our Hispanic friends was immediately like, stopped, like mid football, stopped, and he's like, it's, La Lechuza. And you're like, what? What are you talking about? And then like, then, and I probably had 3 or 4 Hispanic friends there, and they kind of like fed each other. Like that sounded like Lechuza. And, I'm like, I don't even, we've heard of, at different parties, like we've heard of it being talked about, but I've never even
Yeah.
thought twice about that being something that I was going to ever be scared of. So we resumed playing football a little more tentatively,
Yeah.
and then the
You're
sound
like
came
a little
again.
more aware of your
Getting-
surroundings. Yeah.
Getting darker, sound comes again. Finally, one of my Hispanic friends is like, no, you're like, La Lechuza, like I'm done. And he takes off and runs to the camp house. Like he's running to the house.
Oh my gosh.
And you're like, whatever. And then like another, then it's all of a sudden like, we went from maybe 10 people to 9, and then like another, one of our Hispanic friends who's deep in that culture, kind of looks around, and then how he follows. And now you're down to 8. and it's just in it, and then the sound comes again, and I remember it's getting darker, and like we're trying to still play football, and then maybe two more ago,
Yeah.
and you're probably calling them all the names and the like, all the bad
Yeah,
names you
yeah,
can think
yeah.
of, like get back here, whatever. And I remember distinctly, like it was just like we would be playing, and all of a sudden someone would kind of get off the hay bales and run to the house.
Yeah.
And as it got down, it happened, and it got dark. And I remember it being like me and my friend Josh, who helped me with the story. And I'm like, we were the last two. And we're like, I don't know what, like it's almost now of like the pack mentality of like being alone.
Yeah.
It's like you've now convinced yourself, like, I'm not scared. Like, I don't know why everyone else has run and hidden in the camp house. But it's like now we're out here just us two, and it's dark.
Yeah.
And now there's other things kind of going through your head. So it's like, okay, like I think let's
Yeah.
head in,
Maybe it's time for us to go too.
It's
Yeah.
time to go in. And so I remember, going in the camp house, and we've never got a visual of, I at least not that I remember ever getting like a clear visual. And I remember like being in the camp house, and then like now we're trying to scare each other.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you did this as a child, but I remember like I was someone who really loved to scare the people.
Yeah.
But I also learned that when you're in the process of scaring other people, a lot of times you end up scaring yourself really badly because you're putting thoughts in your own head. You're creating a nightmare for someone else, but you're also psychologically putting that in your own head.
Absolutely. Oh
And
my
so
God,
I remember
that's so funny.
like going, like sneaking outside, as we're partying and hanging out in the camp house, and like, all right, like let's Lechuza's gonna bang on the window here. And so like you're outside like sneaking around, and you're like, all right, you're gonna bang on the window to scare everybody, but you're also aware that like you're alone and it's dark outside. It's pitch black behind you. I mean, we're out in the country. There's no lights.
100%.
And so like you're like, oh man, like so banging on the window, and you can hear people getting scared, and then all of a sudden like you hear a noise, and you're like, now you're scared, so you're like, I gotta get back in the house, like. And so like the inside, like the whole like just build up. I just remember like we laughed so hard about like one of our friends, I remember, finally fell asleep, and like he's asleep on the couch, like, and we had all kinds of couches and beds at our camp house, but he's asleep, and he's got like a butcher knife, like a legitimate butcher knife in his hand, and he's like asleep, like with it like pointed towards his head.
Oh my gosh.
And you're like, he was so scared, like he went to sleep with the butcher knife and fell asleep, and you're like, that is not safe. And like I remember that distinctly, and one of our other friends had like a can of like Eris, like wasp spray, like this giant wasp spray, and he's like sleeping with this wasp spray, like in case some creature or something breaks in. And so so that all became kind of horrified, and I do remember like kind of the like only happened in movie, like great finish to this story was like the next morning, it's daylight. Nothing obviously
Everyone
happened
survived.
to us.
Yeah.
Everyone survived. And I remember going outside, me and maybe one or two other friends, to go to the restroom. We went out, we went outside to relieve ourselves. And I remember hearing a distinct, like perfect whistling, like same sound we heard last night, like just perfect. And it was like so clear. And it was like you looked like trying to find it in a tree and just never seeing, that morning owl. Maybe that was his last call before going to go sleep or going somewhere, done hunting, whatever it was. Like never got the visual, but definitely distinct.
That is perfect.
But yeah, you're not supposed to whistle. That's like the Lechuza that calls it. So like if you whistle at night, that'll bring it to you. And there's some other things that, like if you try to do certain things to try to kill it, then it'll like kill you and all your babies and family. So
gosh.
That's my story right there.
I love it. That's perfect. I love stuff like that because, like, when you're a kid, I think like my favorite part is when you're like when you decide to scare your friends, and then there's that moment where you're like, "This is a good idea. This is a good idea," and then you're like, "Oh crap! I think this might have been a bad idea." Like that moment, you're like, "Oh no, what am I doing?"
Yes, I remember like a lot of parties where, like you suggest something that you're just being silly about. Yeah. Like, oh, I saw something. And you saw it too, and you're like, I think it was like one of our, one of our stray cats,
Yeah.
and it's like, but you're gonna suggest something else, like maybe
Yeah.
it was like this big wolf or whatever, like a mountain lion, like there's a mountain lion.
Yeah.
And then it's like after you suggested it was funny and it scared them, but then you start thinking about like,
Like,
what if it
yeah. What if
was?
it was though? Yeah.
Yeah,
You're like,
like
I
now
didn't
you're a
really get a
little
good
kind of
look
like,
at it. Yeah.
yeah, you're not 100% anymore, with your plan. You're kind of a
I
little,
love that. That is so good. Oh man, that is so funny. So I know you're based in Texas. You grew up in Texas as well?
yes, yeah. I grew up in
Similar area to where you are now?
yeah, I actually lived 2 towns over
Oh, cool.
from where I grew up. Yeah, so I grew up
Nice.
in a very small town, like a 1A classification. I graduated with 20 kids. So
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
yeah. So
Wow.
my brother graduated with 14.
Oh my
He's 8 years
god.
older than me, and he played pro baseball and played Double A,
Oh,
and
nice.
his teammates would always be like, I don't know how the topic came up, but one time they asked like, like, oh man, like one of them was talking about how smart one of the player was, and like he was like a valedictorian or something,
Hmm.
like and they asked my brother, and my brother's like, yeah, I finished ninth, in my class, and they're like, damn, Rody, you must be smarter than we thought, and he's like, I never told him there were 14 kids, like, just told him I finished ninth in my
That's
class.
amazing.
Yeah.
That's so good. I love that. I grew up in Pasadena, Texas, like right outside
Okay.
of
Yeah.
Houston, and I always tell people because I live in LA now, which is like obviously huge and way overpopulated, but
A little similar to Houston in some areas.
it's
Yeah.
fair. Yeah, it's very fair.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes. But I always tell people like I will say just to not have to have the conversation. I'll be like, oh yeah, I just grew up in a small town in Texas.
Yes.
And then people are like, oh, cool, because they just hear small town Texas and they're like, yeah, they check out. I mean, Pasadena has like 400,000 people. Like,
Yes.
my graduating class was like almost 500 people. I can't imagine graduating with 14 or even 20. That's so
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. It's like,
That's actual small town Texas. Yeah.
yes, like when your my wife, and she grew up where we live now, so we've known each other.
Oh, cool.
Um, but Castroville, where she grew up, is like, still small town, but like 3,000-4,000 people when she grew up. Now it's probably like 9, 15,
Mm-hmm.
20. I don't know what the number is, but I mean, it's a 4A school now and
Mm-hmm.
getting bigger. So big school. And it's funny, like when we first started, dating, like going to my hometown and like driving, it's like you can pretty much like that's where he lives, and like if you just point at a house, I can tell you their
Yeah.
last name.
I love
Like,
that.
yeah, that's their house, yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool. Um, okay, so Black Rose Writing is getting back to doing in-person events, or is it a little bit like, are you still kind of holding off on that, or where's it at with that kind of stuff for right now?
Yeah, we did the kind of a special edition Texas Frightmare in September of 2021, and we're gonna do that again. That's coming up next in end of April, May.
Cool,
We're gonna do that in person again.
cool.
But in terms of big festivals and stuff, we still haven't really
Mm-hmm.
committed to any yet this year.
Are those from your vantage point? Are those starting to go back to being in person, or is it
I'm
a lot of
seeing
it's
an
kind of like
email that they're doing a lot of I guess dual, where it's like some of it's
hybrid
in
stuff?
person, some of it's
Yeah.
virtual. Um, but yeah, they did some real like secluded events at the Texas Book Festival, like
Mm-hmm.
private signings with authors, but they didn't have the big booths because we were signed up for that one in Austin.
Mm.
And then we've done the LA. I haven't done it, but our authors have had booths at the LA Books Festival a
Oh,
few
cool.
times. But we've always, it's funny, like we've always, LA's always been like one of the lowest in terms of actual book sales, and there could
Oh,
be
I believe it.
combinations in there. There's just it's so big, and there's so many booths that it's like it's
Yeah.
really hard to get someone to buy your books when there's 1,000 other booths that have
Yeah.
authors signing and stuff. So
Yeah.
it's hard to stand that on that end. And then they said that a lot of times we've gotten put off, like they have this big main area and they have a lot of booths going down like side streets
Yeah.
and stuff. And so like it looks like a big wheel. And it's like they just said it's hard because the traffic, a lot of people just don't even make it there. They
Yeah.
end up going elsewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so, but it could also be, the authors that we had do the event. I mean, there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of factors. Obviously, if an
Totally.
author's not very good at marketing their own book and like,
Yeah.
they're not they're more introverted versus
Yeah.
talking and approaching people, then you're not going to sell books. And so
100%. Yeah, 100%.
so there's a lot of factors in there, but I know, and you also like take the positive. Like if you sell 2 books, like yeah, maybe you sat somewhere and sold 2 books,
Exactly.
but maybe you sold 2 books to 2 people you have no clue who they are. You've never met them before. That's 2 more books that are being read that you wrote. And so like, yeah, overall, you wish you could have sold out. You wish you could have sold 10, 20 copies.
Yeah.
But you're still reaching. And like you said, if you have a good time visiting with the place and, trying to get traffic in bookstores for indie bookstores. I always felt that was really fun because maybe you can get a few family friends, people come in, maybe they'll buy other books, not even yours, and shop. That helps the bookstores. So.
Yeah, I love that. I love that so much. Cool. So the Texas Frightmare is going to be April, May-ish, you said?
Yeah, the last weekend of April. So
cool.
I think it's like 29th through May 1st in Dallas, and we'll be there. And that event we do really well at. And I think I try to tell our authors, if you can find an event where you think you can reach readers that's not necessarily a literary event.
Oh, interesting.
Those have done really well. And so kind of like if you're doing a book signing at an antique store or like a lot of like we have like an old fashioned Christmas like event here in our town where vendors come and they sell whatever they want to sell. And we haven't had a booth there in a while for books, but we always did pretty well because there was maybe one other person might have like some Texas history books or something.
Yeah.
But most of the booths aren't book related. So you're not competing with other, with your industry. You're just trying to find readers.
That's
and
so
if someone's
smart.
there like, ooh, I really want a new book. Well, they don't have a lot of choices.
Yeah,
they got to look at
the
your
option.
booth.
Yeah,
that's it. And if they can't find something, they can't find it. But I mean, it really. Whereas we've done like the Miami Book Festival International, and there's just so many, so much competition. It's like really hard to, and you ask yourself, like, if you're walking through that event, what's going to make me stop at any of these booths and buy a book from an unknown author?
Yeah, absolutely. That's so smart. That's so smart.
So Frightmare is good because it's just a horror, and we bring our horror authors, and there's usually about 3 to 4 vendors that have horror authors or novels and stuff. We've noticed, but the rest is like memorabilia and so horror celebrities signing.
Yeah, that's cool.
Things like that.
That's really cool. Cool. So that's happening. And then is there anything else this year that you're looking forward to with Black Rose Writing?
Yeah, mostly, again, I mean, kind of last year we were looking forward to it. Didn't really happen, kind of run into a wall on the in-person book events, actually doing festivals and events for authors. Our book stats and so I think, looking forward to 2022, just hoping we can kind of reach that stage where we can, do more book events again, in person and have our authors be able to attend some festivals again. Gives us a chance to hang out with our authors too.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Hey, thank you so much, Reagan. This was really great, and that story was awesome. I'm like,
oh, good.
I was like so stoked on it. That's like the perfect kind of story.
Good. I'm glad. I went between that, and then I told my wife and I were talking, and we were talking about. I was actually talking to my daughter, who's 8, about like I've tried to build my life, not intentionally, but of late, on pulling positives from any negative. Like that's something if I look back at my life, and everybody should be able to, you look back, what were some of your biggest failures? And like, at the time, obviously they sucked, but like, where did they lead,
Yeah.
And so, not to get into a full nother story, but like mine was, I played college golf and I transferred to play golf, and the coach I transferred to play for left the school.
Oh, wow.
And the scholarship that he had offered me was verbal. And so like it kind of got washed.
Oh my god.
And so I had to qualify for the team. I missed the qualifying by like 1 stroke, and then I got offered an alternate slot, and then I got hurt. I hurt my elbow and couldn't swing.
Oh man.
And so at the time, I'm not going to play golf anymore. Like, I've tried, like I'm just go to school, whatever. And I ended up, because I wasn't playing on the golf team that semester, I ended up working for, just sounded interesting. I did like the school newspaper. I did like sports reporting, like interviewing, and doing the stories for baseball in the school. And then they had a magazine called the Galaxy Magazine, and I wrote a creative. It's really terrible. Like I read it again. it was like a 7-part, like every week they would put it in the magazine, and it was, kind of like would end on a cliffhanger, and it was a 7-part like little suspense mystery story.
I love it.
At the time, like I loved writing it, and it's like you look back now and you're like, this is the worst story ever written. Like it's so cheesy and so bad. And but I wrote that and I worked for the paper, and in hindsight, I would have never done that if I was playing golf full time and going to school. And that was where the editing and the writing really started. Like I'd written creatively, but never like for an actual, purpose. And so then I ended up transferring schools to where my buddy played baseball. I ended up transferring and playing golf on full scholarship. And then at the same time, I worked for the school newspaper as well, doing editing. And then from there, I started doing more editing, like worked for the Houston Chronicle.
Oh, cool.
Just doing like some runner editing and San Marcos Daily Record, and did some like freelance stuff. And so that's, and that's what I was telling my wife. I was telling her that story, telling my daughter, because she was disappointed with something and being like, hey, like, yeah, it's no good now, but I think, this is something that you'll be better because of it.
Yeah.
And like turning a negative into a positive. And my wife's like, that's the story you need to tell Trey on the podcast. I'm like, I've told that story so many times, and like no one wants to hear it anymore. And so I've been debating which one.
I love it.
It kind of like yesterday and this morning, I was like, I'm telling the Lechuza story. I'm going Lechuza. I'm like, this is a different, like,
so
when I do another book podcast, obviously or if someone wants to, and I went on, Kimberly Tilley has like the perfect podcast, because she has like an arc podcast, like where did you, like everyone has an arc in life, like where was your kind of arc? And so that was my arc, was like, this is kind of what, like, it didn't happen at the time, but it led to it just, after 7-8 years, it was kind of the fallback of like, what do I really want to do? And like, I really loved writing for the Galaxy magazine and like working in that field. And like, and I had some books published, and it's like, I really love those experiences. Like, I want to create something for authors that I, as best as it can be, so they can have a better experience than I did, or just more advantages.
Yeah. I love that. I love that so much. And I think it's just like such a perfect lesson to keep with you, is like, hey, you said it best. You're like, hey, I know this sucks right now, and it's okay, because it does suck right now, but like, just try to take a step back, take a breath, and try to understand, like, hey, this could have so much of a bigger purpose down the road.
Yeah, I do it all the time now. Like I think about it immediately. Like I got the can't pull it up high enough, but I actually have a boot on. A medical boot.
No.
I about 2.5 weeks ago tore my gastrocnemius, my calf muscle. Tore it on one side, partial tear on the other. The Achilles is still attached. But playing tennis, I did it on a big serve. And are you a tennis? Like, are you familiar with tennis?
I'm familiar. Yeah, familiar.
I was playing my staff member, Justin Weeks, in our sales team.
Okay, yeah.
We have these epic matches, and they're always epic. Like, we're just so equal right now in our tennis stages. And I was like, man, could it have been worse? It was 6-6 in the first set, and it was 7-6 in the tiebreak.
Oh, no.
And I was serving, obviously, next point, I would have won the first set. Yeah. And my calf it felt like someone shot me, like exploded on the serve.
God.
Down I went, and and so now I'm in a boot, and it's going to be about 4 months or so before I can play tennis again.
Oh my!
But I told, like, my wife is always more like frustrated than I am. I'm like, I'm the one who's injured here. Like, I understand. Like, I'm still getting stuff done. I make do, and it's like, hey, it gives me a chance to rest a little more, and like like I've been like on the weekends, like me and my son's 5, like he played Star Wars on the Xbox, and like, I don't have anything else to do, it forces you to sit like and enjoy, and it's like a tiller, like it's a positive. Spend more time with, like, he's loving, he's not upset that he's in a boot and like playing video games with him.
Yeah.
I mean, like, he's pumped. Like,
I love that.
I said, yeah, these are moments that you're not going to get back, when your kids get older. And it's I can always play. I can play tennis in 4 months. Like, I can do other things.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
I've been doing upper body.
There you go. There you go. I was neglecting my arms lately anyway. So this is,
So in Frightmare, like, the biggest name for me, there's some good names, but Carl Weathers is going to be at Frightmare.
Oh, cool.
And I told my staff members, I was like, if Carl Weathers will do it, and I haven't gotten any pictures or anything with any of this. There's been some celebs there
For
and stuff,
sure,
but I
for
just
sure.
haven't really messed with them. I visited with a lot of them, like when we're setting up, but I'm not a big, like, I need to get an autograph or a
Totally.
picture or whatever.
Yeah, totally.
But I was like, I'm going to give Carl Weathers the handshake from Predator.
Yeah, yeah,
I was like,
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
going to give him the handshake, Dutch, the handshake there, and see if he'll take a picture. And so I've been doing some more curls and like pull up, chin ups. I was like, I got to get the bicep to at least have a little bit there. Like, I don't want to embarrass Arnold. Like, I don't want Arnold Schwarzenegger to be like, damn. Like, I don't want him to be upset with the iconic, Carl Weathers, Arnold Schwarzenegger.
God.
But I was like, I gotta have something there, like
That
just a little bicep
so
showing, so I can
good.
flex it when I handshake him. I don't. And so they're like, I'm doing it. If Carl Weathers will do it, I'm gonna give him the handshake and get a selfie of the handshake or whatever.
I love it. I think that's perfect.
So I got a few more months, and now that I hurt my leg, I can really focus on.
There you go.
Yeah, let's get the biceps.
You just
popping.
Work out the one arm for the next.
Yeah,
4
one arm.
months.
Don't even worry about the left arm. Yeah, we just get the one.
That's so good. Oh my gosh, that is so funny. I love that. Reagan, thank you so much, man. It's been great to chat and great to connect. And yeah, I'll just look forward to connecting more soon.
Yeah, shoot me an email when everything's ready to share. And obviously if you need anything.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it. Yeah, man, have a great rest of your week. I'll talk to you soon.
You too. Thanks, brother.
Right, see ya.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Tell Me Yours. Thank you, Reagan, for sharing that story. Kids are crazy, and I love it. If you want to follow Reagan and Black Rose Writing, head over to Instagram. They are just at Black Rose Writing. On Twitter, they are BRW Publisher. Or you can head over to their website, blackrosewriting.com. If you are in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, Black Rose Writing will have a booth at this year's Texas Frightmare Weekend. It is the largest horror convention in the state of Texas. That will be from April 29th through May 1st, 2022. Please be sure, if you go, to check out Black Rose Writing's booth. I'm sure they'll have lots of books, maybe some cool swag. It'll be a great time. Say hi to Reagan. If you want some extra time with Reagan, head over to our Patreon, patreon.com/tellmeyours. And if you want to follow us, Twitter and Instagram @tellmeyyourspod. This would also be a great time to remind everyone that if you head over to blackrosewriting.com and you find my book Beneath the Surface, plug in the promo code TellMeYours at checkout to save 20% on your order. Reagan was awesome enough to offer this discount to Tell Me Yours podcast listeners, so be sure to go take advantage of it. And until next week, be kind to each other, and we'll talk soon.